DEI, CRT, hashtag BLM, LGBTQIA+. Earlier generations would consider the initials I just uttered incomprehensible, or they might be several unfortunate rounds of Scrabble tile selections. Now these abbreviations fuel political commentary, activism, and public debate. They are triggering terms for many of us. I'll define the terminology in the order I mentioned each abbreviation. DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, are corporate, academic, and governmental efforts to empower people who have traditionally been ignored or denied participation due to physical disabilities, medical conditions, racial and ethnic identity, sex, or sexual orientation. CRT, or critical race theory, recognizes that throughout U.S. history, our society's laws developed along racial lines in a very deliberate effort to maintain slavery, segregation, exploitative economics, and inferior status for African Americans and other racial minority groups. CRT achieved scant notoriety until reactionary right-wing outlets unearthed it from relative obscurity. Before that, a handful of legal scholars explored the concept with little fanfare. Discrimination was, in fact, the law of the land. It's foolish to believe we've fixed it all, and it's naive to suggest we have no problem today. Hashtag BLM, or Black Lives Matter, sprang forth in reaction to wanton police killings of Black Americans while they were arrested or detained for minor crimes, routine traffic stops, or mere suspicion. LGBTQIA+ stands for our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and other non-binary friends, and their ways to explore and express their own sexuality. LGBTQIA+ creates an umbrella, a big tent, or a spectrum for sexual identities other than the male, female, heterosexual, or straight orientation. Unitarian Universalists, or UUs, and I'll use the abbreviation for expediency and to hop on the initialism bandwagon, accepts these concepts as part of our personal education and growth. We view them as advancing social justice and indeed as social progress. Many academics and activists join the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, which governs our denomination, to support these initiatives, since they reflect the guiding principles of this religion. We UUs, and not only UUs by any means, find ourselves dismayed to witness vocal opposition to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We struggle to understand why anyone would encourage or deny racial discrimination and expect brutality from law enforcement. We can't fathom why elements in the culture would censor curricula to try to erase slavery, lynching, Jim Crow, segregation, xenophobia, homophobia, and transphobia from American history. I refer to these bleak, difficult historic issues for two reasons. First, because Unitarians, Universalists, and post-1961, after they merged, embraced the abolition of slavery, endorsed anti-lynching laws, supported voting rights and the civil rights movement, and formed welcoming congregations to encourage acceptance of the queer community. My second reason We now bear witness to an increasingly coarse social and political culture that exploits fear, mistrust, and division. We, as UUs, must challenge this new political order while maintaining core UU values. I must confess, every day offers up a new atrocity that sorely tests my charity toward those with whom I now disagree. Bear in mind that I'm a veteran of many social debates with conservatives since the 1970s, the decade in which I developed my adult sensibilities. I had many lively disagreements with conservative friends over the role of government, the efficacy of social programs, the wisdom of militarism, the extent of our ecological crises, immigration, or how to deal with crime. After those encounters, we remained friends. I miss those days, and I hope that kind of cordial competition returns. Let me begin with DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. When diversity stood for the USA's notion of the melting pot, who could object? We've perfected ethnic cuisines that Irish, Italian, Chinese, Mexican, and French citizens barely recognize, but they mean a lot to us. The same applies to art and music. The debate of my formative years, affirmative action, wasn't about whether DEI had merit. It was about social action versus slow, passive change. Now I hear members of the alt-right base using DEI as a three-syllable insult, which, I'm sorry, it makes me think they'd prefer the old offensive two-syllable term, which for decades has been considered an obscenity. We're now firing Department of Justice officials and dismantling the Department of Education. We're losing the people who enforce Title IX and other rules that allow women, physically challenged, and differently abled students, among others, to enjoy the same facilities the rest of us take for granted. These measures go beyond ethnicity and sex. DEI initiatives help everyone get access to mainstream educational programs. They give us all accommodations to help us all participate on an equal footing. BLM, or Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Ayo Tometi forged that movement after Trayvon Martin's murder. BLM called attention to the disparity between how our black and white citizens experience justice. The knee-jerk mainstream white reaction countered #BLM by weekly proclaiming, "All lives matter." There's a problem with that protestation. It's true, especially to UUs, that all lives do indeed matter. The problem is that all lives don't end at a routine traffic stop, the way it did for Philando Castile, and to bring it closer to home, Sandra Bland. George Floyd didn't live to stand trial for his alleged misdemeanor. Elijah McClain was murdered while not only protesting his innocence, but while emphatically citing solid examples of his pacifist nature. These police crimes make up a small example of why the Black Lives Matter movement arose and why it's still relevant as we speak. I want to turn to LGBTQIA+, and I hope I don't minimize anyone in the community, but I want to focus specifically on transphobia. Merely because a minority of human beings within a minority found themselves victims of yet another baseless moral panic. Trans can mean many things. Transvestism, which describes people who may be either gay or straight, who find fulfillment in cross-dressing. Interpreted broadly, transvestites do represent the history of theater, from ancient Greece through Shakespeare, all the way to more contemporary examples like the beloved Milton Berle, Flip Wilson's Geraldine, even if the devil made her do it, the Firesign Theater, Monty Python's Flying Circus, The Kids in the Hall, and today, RuPaul. By the way, I love a service that can work in Monty Python and the Firesign Theater. Now, drag artists set off alarms from the alt-right over school and library story hours designed to cultivate and expand young people's sense of humor. But beyond the drag entertainment establishment, our fellow human beings must endure oppression and discrimination from bigots who cannot, as the maxim goes, walk a mile in another person's shoes. In fact, a certain overzealous plutocrat recently told us that empathy was our nation's Achilles heel. Empathy as weakness, a flaw. God forbid we should care about each other. Transgenderism and transsexuality include a multitude of personal situations and personal decisions. So many reactionary alt-right platforms have been promoting the toxic misinformation that biology only gives us XX and XY chromosomes for our birth identities. And that's just not true. A student of Mendel can explain how many variants exist from the most basic genetic components. Humans are no exception. Infants born with what medical science historically called ambiguous genitalia usually found themselves surgically altered into females. That was the default at the time. Others born with different genetic combinations go through changes at puberty. Many of our friends, biology aside, simply don't feel comfortable living in the sex assigned them on their birth certificate. Just suppose for a moment that manhood didn't pivot on archetypes of aggression and control, and womanhood didn't depend on archetypes of passivity and obedience. Why should we consider it impossible that someone has always felt misassigned biologically or culturally? The reactionary alt-right treats transgenderism as if it were a recent invention. People have challenged their gender identity throughout human existence. How they survived, or even whether they survived, depended on the tolerance, openness, and sheer humanity of the culture they inhabited. We've all known, at some times in our lives, that kid who just didn't fit in. Back in the day, that different kid got corkscrewed into conforming, endured beatings and intimidation, got ostracized from the family, got murdered, or sadly, often took their own lives. Electroshock, lobotomy, and chemical castration were once accepted treatment. Today, we have conversion therapy, mostly offered as religious counseling. Other countries have outlawed conversion therapy because their officials view it as quackery, a human rights violation, or both. It's hard to fathom the changes we're witnessing right now. Since late January, the executive branch deleted Colin Powell's biography from the Defense Department archive, removed references to Black History Month, expunged information about LGBT Pride Month and the Stonewall Uprising, basically scrubbing recent U.S. history of civil rights progress. Reactionary right officials now attack social justice movements as woke. Woke, a term originally invented by African American activists to describe black people who embraced awareness of their oppression, and non-black people who followed suit. Woke is this era's political correctness, much like the short-lived attacks on SJW or social justice warriors. It's hard for considerate people to take wokeness, awareness, and social justice as an insult. UUs make up that expanding circle of considerate people. Calling people what they want to be called, our parents taught us to do that. It was common courtesy. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. That's every religion's golden rule. We practice and extend that by treating others as they want to be treated. That's progressive, not merely progressive as the current political label. That's personal growth and genuine progress for our society. UU congregations and our parent organization have always supported civil rights, social justice, anti-discrimination, and resistance to oppression. We formed welcoming congregations to counter anti-LGBTQIA bias. We embrace Black Lives Matter. We stand against efforts to censor free expression. We oppose the idea of erasing our history. We speak out against movements to narrow and restrict public education. UUs resist the current temptation to return the USA to a glorious yesterday that never existed. It certainly didn't exist for the many people who identify with the initials, abbreviations, and acronyms I talked about this morning. Unitarian Universalists won't change our values to fit the latest political fashion. UU and you and I faced disappointment and struggled before. Today's conflicts may seem insurmountable. They are not. We will overcome the climate of fear and division and make the United States of America and the world a better place. Thank you.